The last may not have been heard of some of the revelations in the newly published autobiography of Chief Bisi Akande, the former governor of Osun State and the erstwhile Potem national chairman of the ruling All Progressive Congress APC, claimed in his book, My Participations, that President Muhammadu Buhari reneged in a promise to make a former governor of Lagos State, Bola Tinubu, his running mate ahead of the 2015 elections. But many of the Buhari close allies and foot soldiers who were privy to some of the negotiations and horse trading that preceded the 2015 elections called this day newspaper, with respect to its lead story on Friday titled Akande, Buhari promised to pick Tinubu as running mate in 2015, then reneged, which was an extract of Akande's autobiography, saying they were dismayed over the report and strongly disagreed with the author's account of events. According to them, all that Buhari said was he was going to partner and work with Tinubu in the context of a partnership between the Southwest and the Northwest, reiterating that the president never promised Tinubu vice president or running mate, contrary to claims made by Akande in the book. This is peak political season, and this is opening up Tundu.
That's exactly what I thought. And you know, last week it was really such a statement of the obvious when we observed here that there would be reactions to the book. Obviously, any kind of a memoir is your personal perspective, your opinion on events that occurred. So obviously other people have their own contrary views. There's been already a response from former Vice President Atiku Abubakar with regards to Chief Bisi Akande's claims that it was Asiwaju Tinubu bankrolling the party. He strongly refutes that, or his spokespersons strongly refute that and say that they were all one big political family. There's also been a response from the Yoruba leader Olufalaye, or the preview to a response, saying that he will read the book and respond in due time to allegations that were made against him. So we're expecting that as well. So this, for me, is not surprising, because the idea that President Buhari reneged makes President Buhari look untrustworthy or dishonorable. But personally, I find it quite a stretch to imagine a Muslim ticket in Nigeria that we have today. So I'm not entirely sure whether that was really ever going to be on the table. That would have been a hard sell to Nigerians. It's not the way things work. We're not back in 1993. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on, Tundu. It would have been a hard sell to Nigerians at that point in time. And the book, definitely, like you said, will get a lot of reactions, because a part of that book, you know, talked about the fact that Bola Ahmed Tinubu has always been denied, you know, a running mate position. And the fact that he deserves it, based on the book, based on the fact that he was bringing his weight into the campaign, based on the fact that the merger was made possible because he decided to do a deal with President Buhari. That's their own side of the story. And that's what they're saying is the fact. But we've had many other, you know, recollections of what really happened. In fact, there's a story circulating on social media how somebody wrote, based on his recollection of what happened, that it was, you know, it was a hard sell even to pick Vice President now, Oshibajo, to be a running mate with President Buhari, because after President Buhari said, oh, the Muslim ticket was not possible, and some of his aides said the Muslim ticket was not possible, it was said that Bola Ahmed Tinubu was not happy about it. In his camp, he felt disgruntled, and there was a team of people that picked 3 other people, you know, to be running mates. There was a name, Adams Oshomola, being banded in there. There was another case of Olagunsoyin Oyinlola being put in there, and there was Yemi Oshibajo. Olagunsoyin Oyinlola obviously wasn't a good sell with the likes of Baba Bisi Akande, you know, that reneged against it. Adams Oshomola wasn't a good sell too, and it had to come down to Yemi Oshibajo. And they said they made that infamous call to Yemi Oshibajo that day and said, where are you? And said, okay, he was in Abuja. And they went ahead, and how they also talked about how Governor of Ogun State, Governor Mosu, former Governor of Ogun State, Governor Mosu, brokered the deal, how he personally did take Vice President Yemi Oshibajo down to President Buhari and said, okay, this is your running mate. And they filled the form in the house of President Muhammadu Buhari, then in Abuja. You know, so that's another account as regards what's transpired. This is another account. And definitely, we're going to hear many accounts. And just like we heard this account, by some people, some of the president's close allies, they're saying, he didn't say that. He didn't promise him anything. He just said there was going to be a partnership. But I'd like to stretch it further. Then what were the terms of agreement of this partnership? Because if you have a coalition coming together, like we see in other climes, definitely you'll share positions. So what was it? Was it just ministerial position that was part of the deal? Because we've not heard the last of it, obviously.
No.
And all of this even started, I'll dial back to an interview we had with Chief Oshoba here a couple of months ago. And he talked about the fact that there was an agreement made. So Chief Bisi Akande is saying that this agreement was on the table. Chief Oshoba too had enunciated on the part of this agreement and said there was an agreement made. But the Buhari camp is saying there was no agreement made of a running mate, agenda of some sort. Then what really transpired between these two people? Because we'll never get to know, because it's not a case of you against me. And then we'll ask one step further. Then what was the concession promised? Was it that Bola Ahmed Tinubu was just going to bring in his political might and help President Muhammadu Buhari? That was it? And he was going to submit a vice presidential candidate to President Muhammadu Buhari like he finally did? Or he was going to be the vice presidential candidate in the kitty, for the ticket? So what was the fine lines of this agreement, this gentleman agreement they had? Because now that is beginning to bubble up now. We are seeing books, and I'm sure it's a political season. Prior to the end of this political season, we'll have more books. We'll have more insights. People will get their camps to write more books about this. But we will never get to the end of what they really agreed among themselves.
I want to go a step further and wonder if the agreement also had to do with handing over in 2023. Was that a part of it?
God bless you for that.
Is that what we're going to be hearing more of at this point?
Because Chief Oshoba, in the last interview we had with Chief Oshoba, enunciated that part of the agreement. And he said that was the agreement. There was a possibility of handing over to Bola Ahmed Tinubu in that agreement. That's the part of Chief Oshoba. That's also the part of Chief Bisi Akande. Then the question is, what changed? And as we're saying all of this, a lot of people are beginning to look into the APC and say, the APC might be imploding. In fact, Iyorchia Ayu, the chairman of the PDP, is now saying that
they're not going to last.
They're not going to last. But definitely one thing is certain. This agreement that they had in the room somewhere prior to the 2015 election, if it's not well sought out, might just be the albatross of the APC coming into the 2023 elections. Because there must be a definitive stance of what was said, what was agreed, what was shared and what wasn't shared. Or else, the Bola Ahmed camp will be saying, on your mandate we shall stand. The Buhari camp will be saying, we didn't agree anything, we just called for a partnership, like they are saying now. Time will tell. Interesting time for Nigerian politics. That's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Roto Sudiri and Michael Wilson to give us updates on African global business. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Moving on to more global business update. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. It's a big week this week. Asia Pacific markets trading basically higher across the board, looking towards central bank meetings, but also the big risk of the new variant. People have not trying to work out exactly all about that. So Asia Pacific's Nikkei up about 1%, South Korea's Kospi up 0.55, Hong Kong's Hang Seng about 1% up, the Shanghai Composite up 2%. Now, the China's Sense Time has postponed a multi-million-dollar Hong Kong IPO after being placed on the US investment blacklist. It remained committed to completing the offering and would publish a supplemental prospectus and an updated listing timetable. That's what the company's actually said. It was going to sell 1.5 billion shares. had it floated. But again, this US ban crimping its progress so far. So as far as the US is concerned, then stock futures relatively flat this morning after the S&P had a good Friday. Stock futures rose very, very slightly indeed. The Dow Jones Industrials up about 90 points. But really, the investors sort of shrugged off what I think was a very, very hot inflation reading last week. In the headline inflation came in at 6.8% for November. And surely now this is a message to the Fed and to Jay Powell that it needs to remove its stimulus package more quickly even than it had been planning. It's not transitory. This is deep stuff. And he himself said late last week, but before these figures, that it was highly uncertain when inflation would moderate. Some big investment from Abu Dhabi. This is into a chip maker called Global Foundries. Abu Dhabi's got a sort of state investment thing called Mubadala. And it thinks that the semiconductor market is going to double. It's 50 years for it. They're saying 50 years for it to get to where it is now. They think the next couple of years it will actually double. It manages over $240 billion in funds, and it's a major shareholder of chip maker Global Foundries, and it's staying with that. Very, very bullish about the progress there. To the UK then, and you know that it's hiked its coronavirus threat level. Omicron is threatening. It's all about boosters now. The Prime Minister is talking about a tidal wave of infection. The chief medical officers of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland said it adds, and this is a quote from them, Omicron adds additional and rapidly increasing risk to the public and healthcare services. The alert's gone from 3 to 4. When it gets to 5, that means that public health services are going to be overwhelmed. So we're getting there. And you know, nobody has any idea where this is going. Unsurprisingly, UK airlines have also called for support now. BA, Virgin, Ryanair, EasyJet, amongst the leaders in that. There's plenty of them, clearly saying that they need economic support. They need some kind of unnecessary testing of fully vaccinated passengers to try to get travel going. I suspect this. I mean, they are meeting today with government officials. Whether they'll get any joy out of that, I don't know. UK ports on course for the worst year since 1983. Rather surprisingly, it's not just about containers, but it's also about the fact consumer demand did bounce back and all the rest of it. But a third of port volumes is oil, and that is actually not being used as we speak. Half of UK families are finding there that disposable income is the worst since it's been since 2019. I mean, I quote this because what it's talking about is consumer demand, and that's very, very important as far as our sort of consumer economies are concerned. So a big week ahead coming up then. First of all, let's talk about the Fed. What on earth is it going to do? Is it going to increase? Are we going to get more signals about it cutting its asset buy program? I suspect so. I think those inflation numbers spoke for themselves on Friday, and there will be a major shift. As far as the ECB is concerned as well, the ECB is looking at European inflation well above the sort of level they're talking about. Record high early this month, coming in at 4.9% for November. But still, she is saying, Christine Lagarde, that there's no rate hikes so far, and she actually said last week no rate hikes next year, referring to 2022. I'd be very interested to see what they think about that right now. And the Bank of England finally meeting, and it's hard really. It was obviously a shambles last month rather. Lots of expectation of interest rate rise, and it didn't happen. The markets think they just bottled the decision basically, and the post-meeting messaging in the wake of the 7-2 decision didn't even add up as far as the arithmetic was concerned. This man here, Andrew Bailey, said that he felt that it was a very close call. It clearly wasn't a close call, and they're looking basically at employment now. We're going to get figures about that later in the week, but I suspect it really will be now for the Bank of England to call. That is your global view this Monday morning.
Right, Michael, real quickly, let's talk about those disposable income troubles Those are part of the headwinds that will hit the UK economy, vis-a-vis the increasing inflation. I mean, this is just unthinkable what will be happening to Britain next year. Vis-a-vis, the Bank of England that can make decisions, vis-a-vis crisis with the energy companies. Some have gone into administration. The cost will be put back on the people. So just so much spending. And vis-a-vis a prime minister that is on tenterhooks now. What is going to be the outlook for 2022? Too early to say anyway, but these are the issues.
I agree, yes. What's your question?
My question
I couldn't
is,
agree with you more.
My question is, disposable income troubles, is there anything that can be done about it in the UK? Because families are going to suffer. Is there anything the BOE probably will do or the economic planners in the UK can do about that? And secondly, is there anything that can be done to cushion the effect of the cost being passed on by the energy companies to the consumers?
No, I don't think so. I think that the Bank of England, whatever you think about it, summed it up rather well when it sort of apologised in November, didn't it, for the rise in the cost of living. Unfortunately, it hits poor families more than it hits rich families because they tend to spend a larger proportion of their smaller income, as it were, on items which have high inflation at the moment. Energy prices, as they are all the way around the world, and also food, which is increasing again all the way around the world, particularly in China. Everybody's facing these kind of problems, and it's not just the UK. It's every country in the world, every developed country in the world is facing the same kind of pressures. I think what's happening here is that we have a central bank governor who, according to the markets, bottled the decision in November about raising interest rates, could just do slightly, and may well have to do it again, because it's still very unclear as to whether, I was reporting over the weekend, for example, that the rise in Omicron is actually weakening the economy. Of course it is, because most people are now staying at home. Once again, lockdown is not that far away. We're at level 4, and so therefore we're not going out, we're not spending money. Yes, there's been a crimp of disposable income. It's very, very serious indeed. I think 2022 is going to be a very, very difficult year for most economies around the world, unless somebody is magically printing money. Well, we've seen that. We've seen the money being printed. Now it has to be paid for everywhere.
All right, that's a sad one coming out of the UK. I'd like to talk about Mubadala trying to invest in the chip business. Do you think the UAE can be the new home of chip making? And how quick can they do that?
It's a very interesting prospect, that, isn't it? That would change. That would change the year, actually, if that were to happen. It's still an investment rather than actually producing anything. But it's clear from what they're saying this morning that they think that the market for cells, the semiconductor production, and the market for them is going to grow, as they put it, exponentially, which is actually quite a big word, isn't it? Which means, presumably, that the market will, as I take it, will double, over the next few years, and the production. Now, that would be very interesting, wouldn't it? You're quite right. If that were to be something that the UAE were to move towards, that would, one, solve their transition away from fossil fuels into actually creating something which is, in inverted commas, as far as I know, carbon zero, and that would help them in their targets, but would also take away our dependence upon South Korea and China. I think it's a very interesting story, isn't it? I think we're just seeing the seeds of it right now, but it's worth looking at next year, certainly.
All right, and lastly, I'd like to know about this current restructuring going on by, the Evergrande company, to see how they can pay the bondholders, which they've defaulted on a couple of times. Is China trying to play smart? Is China trying to bail them out without letting anybody know?
I think what it's trying to do, and again, I can only guess, because you never know. Even though you look at the figures, it's terribly difficult to understand what's going on there. I think what we're seeing, and I put it last week as being like a sort of managed behind the scenes dismantling of Evergrande, because the empty properties are still there. the business model didn't work. It's clear that the Chinese authorities do not want to let this overflow into the rest of the world, because it would leave them with a lot of egg on their faces if that were to happen. And I think what they're trying to do is manage it as best they can. But it's going through these deadlines. So's Kaiser as well. I mean, the two of them are really reflecting what is essentially wrong and weak with China's economy, which is this huge, as you said, did you? I mean, I quote you on this, actually. You said, didn't you, you could fit a small European country into the empty flats. I mean, it's empty apartments. It beggars belief, quite honestly. But I think that's what's happening. I think there is this managed dismantling of the company to try to save some face from what's actually going on. And unfortunately, what's actually going on are commercial pressures. You know, you borrow the money, you've got to pay it back.
All right. We'd like to say a very big thank you to you, Michael. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Michael Wilson there. Right, our dependable Rotudiri is here to give us Africa Business Update. Rotus, good morning.
Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Tundu. Good morning to all our viewers. So the diplomatic row between the United Arab Emirates and Nigeria, it looks like things are getting a bit worse. The General Civil Aviation Authority over in the UAE, the GCAA, wrote a letter to the Hadi Sirika, that is, of course, the Minister of Aviation, stating that Air Peace apparently, according to the GCAA, Air Peace switched their slots from Dubai International Airport to Sharjah, and then tried to switch back last minutes, and so they lost their slots. According to the GCAA, Dubai International Airport has capacity of 140%. They're saying Air Peace lost their place in line because it's such a busy airport. Air Peace, of course, has written to the ministry and says that's not the case, and that there's some, according to them, quote-unquote aviation politics. So it's a this person said versus that person said. Now, who are the losers? It's a festive period. You've got people that need to be traveling in. You can blame a lot of this on the Omicron variant, but there are going to be losers. There's going to be a fallout out of this, depending on who you want to say is worse off. Is it Emirates that's worse off for losing all the Nigerian traffic that it gets? Because here's what happened. As a result of Air Peace losing its slots at Dubai International Airport, it reported the UAE to the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority. They then now reduced the number of flights that Emirates gets into Nigeria, which then caused Emirates to then cancel all its flights as of today. So it's a back and forth. I mean, this has been going back on since March, right? Between the two nations. So, I guess, I'd be interested to hear what you both think as far as, how this plays out and who really loses here. But you have to say, for the Emirates to just cancel all their flights, does that mean that the volume of traffic from Nigeria compared to what they get from other countries isn't that high? If you look at Dubai's top visitors to Dubai, Nigeria is not in the top 10. I believe it's India, Russia, France, and a number of other nations that are, as far as the top 10 visitors to the United Arab Emirates is concerned. Air Peace just bought aircraft or ordered aircraft from the Dubai Air Show. Arise News was the Fashion Week was in Dubai. So, who loses more? That's a debate that's up there. Nigeria also has, Rufai, you got your wish. Nigeria has also restricted flights from, I think, the UK, Canada, and Saudi Arabia in response to those countries placing restrictions on Nigerian flights as a result of the Omicron variant. Again, who loses here? Interestingly, we're going to be getting our Q3 capital importation reports later today from the Bureau of Statistics for Nigeria. And as I've said in the past, the United Kingdom is the largest source of capital coming into Nigeria. We'll see what those numbers look like, but I expect the UK to still remain there. So, continuing the festive period, we've now got flights restricted both ways. What does that mean for air travel? I believe that it's going to severely depress the number of folks that we see coming into the nation. To Egypt, Egypt is going to join JP Morgan's bond index by the end of January of next year. JP Morgan's Emerging Market Bond Index is a bond index that recognizes and applies a weighting, an investment weighting to particular countries. So I believe Egypt is going to get a 1.8% weighting. They've got about 14 or so bonds, which account for about $26 to $30 billion or so. And this is going to bring more liquidity to Egyptian securities. Again, I referenced Nigeria's capital market importation report, which is going to come out later. That shows the amount of foreign interest in Nigeria's securities. Q1 we're at 1.9 billion. Q2 we fell to about, I think, 843 million or so, 875 million. We fell about 54%. So Egypt used to be on the index in 2011. They were removed. Nigeria used to be on the index. We were removed in 2015. But JP Morgan said, I think Egypt and Ukraine, they're putting them back on a monitoring scheme to admit them, and now Egypt is going to be admitted. So as far as liquidity and exposure to investors, it's good for Egypt. And then South Africa. For South Africa's Financial Sector Conduct Authority has reportedly said that they are going to release a regulatory framework for cryptocurrencies in order to protect investors. South Africa so far has had a hands-off approach for cryptocurrencies, but what they're saying is that they want to be able to mitigate risk for any investors who could possibly lose money from investing in crypto. So to be interested to see what the regulation looks like, I think they're aiming for first quarter of 2022 for that to come out. And that's our update from the continent.
Well, the Minister for Aviation, Hadi Sirika, well, he was quoted as making a moral case for banning flights from the UK, Saudi, and Canada. But what is the commercial case is what I'm wondering, rather than merely the moral case. Is there a commercial case for those bans?
Of course. I mean, you have to think about who travels more in which direction, right? That is what you have to look at and balance it out. So who loses more? Does Nigeria lose more from restricting flights from the UK, from Canada, from Saudi Arabia, or does Saudi Arabia, if you look at them in silos, is Saudi Arabia losing by restricting flights to Nigeria? You have to look at the traffic, right, in both directions. So that's how the numbers break down. And I mean, if Rufai, I'm eager to hear what you have to say, because you made this case about a week ago, did you not? So 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I made the case. Tundu, are you done?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, so Rotus, this is a clear case not of commercial consideration.
Right.
This is a moral case. We're sovereign states. If they too understand the commercial consequences, they wouldn't do what they did based on ill-informed science.
That Tundu mentioned the science, yeah, exactly.
I'm totally in support of what Hadi Sirika has done. Because you see, you can't keep pushing people around. This colonialism shouldn't continue. You're making a case and say FDIs and all of that, the UK bringing money in. But Rotus, one other part of that money that comes in that we are not quick to talk about is the fact that at first 30% of that money goes back in consultancy fees to the UK.
Okay, it's fair.
So when they are saying, no, they're giving you aid and all of that, 30% of that is going back in consultancy fee to the UK.
Okay.
That case,
yeah,
we can look inward and start to fix our own problems. See, I'm not going to come and tell you here that we don't have problems. And that's why I keep calling out our leaders every day. It behoves on them to do right by the people. To build about that capital base. To be able to pump money into our own economy. Bring about that capital injection. It is needed. But here, it's not a case for commercial consideration. It is a case for moral consideration. And morally, it's wrong. What they have done is not based on the science. They don't have any way to prove it. I mean, I'm totally in support of Hadi Sirika. Go you, Hadi Sirika. And it makes a lot of sense to do this. Two national dailies this morning was talking about the fact that the UK might put us off the red list. Another one said the UK says, oh, they will not be threatened by Nigeria putting them on the red list. It shows that it is resonating already. They're getting the memo. Katrina Lang was speaking last week. She said, oh, yeah, we banned the UK based on Nigeria based on XYZ. But when the journalist asked her, how would you feel when the UK, when Nigeria decides to ban the UK? She says, oh, Nigeria should follow the science. What do you mean by that?
They didn't follow the science.
So they didn't follow the science in the first. So it just shows who they are in this regard. We will grind through it. I know it will be tough. But it's not the end of the world. Maybe it will bring about innovation. We'll look at all the routes. We'll look at the possibility of other routes. Because see, Rotus, everything was created. This same Dubai we're going to, as at 1999, there was no Dubai. in the grandeur that it has today. It was created over a period of time.
Yep.
So maybe we'll look for other destinations too. We'll look for Cape Verde.
What, you haven't told us whether you support it or not.
Oh, no, I completely support it.
Oh, you do?
Oh,
Okay,
yes,
okay.
I do. But I have another question. We don't have direct flights to and from Canada, so how is that ban going to work in practical terms?
If you are, as far as the final destination being Nigeria is concerned, they're basically using origin and final destination. If you're of coming from Canada and you are coming into this country, Nigeria is saying we don't want the risk of Omicron spreading here. So I think that's the basis on which they are saying, so whether it's flights that are routed through other destinations or whatever, if your origin is Canada, coming into Nigeria, for now it's restricted. So
Yeah, because Canada won't even accept PCR tests from Nigeria. It's really gotten that bad.
That's how.
No, I support it, but I just want to know the commercial case for it.
Gotcha.
And another thing I wanted to talk about is, Egypt getting on that JP Morgan index.
Yeah, the Egypt, yeah.
Getting good investment. I think these are things we should look at. We should be able to sort our own issues out because we need to attract foreign direct investment. And how we do it, we must think out of the box and do it quickly.
We will see those numbers later today.
Because
don't worry.
I mean, I don't foresee those numbers being great.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to go back and think through those numbers. I believe it is possible in Nigeria. I believe the economy is viable. I believe there are a lot of possibilities. But the question is, we need to get our house in order.
Yep.
And make things work. Egypt, like you were looking up, most of the great investment they've got is in the oil industry.
Yep.
A lot into gas.
Correct.
In Egypt.
Yep.
So why can't we drag this investment into our gas sector here that is much needed? But because we have a lot of bottlenecks, ease of doing business is not great. And those are things that our leaders too should go back. Because you see, once we start to say we want to make a case in the world, our leaders too should meet the people halfway. They should do right by the people, put in good policies that make Nigeria compete effectively. You can't say you want to stand tall. You can't claim sovereignty. You can't claim a national interest. And you still have issues like corruption and all sorts, and making bad policies that affect ease of doing business still terrible.
Good point.
So it has to be a concerted effort.
Yep.
Because I know it's the beginning of the long game Nigeria is at here for financial dominance at some point on the African continent and looking forward to the world. And Rotus, it is possible. You might look at me and say, I'm overly being optimistic this morning.
Yeah.
But this is the only country we've got.
Very true, very true.
And we can make it a miracle. We have seen nations make their country an economic miracle. Social mobility changed in China in the space of 30 years.
Yeah.
China had an accelerated development in the space of 20 years. China wasn't growing this much until they joined the WTO in year 2000. Recently, Americans were even regretting for allowing China get into the WTO.
Right.
Of course they are.
But in the space of 20 years, see what China did do.
Right.
So we too can move the needle on social mobility, but it has to be a cohesive effort. If the people are pushing, the leaders too should push. This is not the time to play partisan politics of APC and PDP. Nigeria is bigger than that.
Well, there's an election in 2023,
Yeah,
so as far as reforms next year...
It's time we should look beyond all those partisan politics, those little thinking of corruption, and how we can make this country can be a giant. It is a giant.
We are at a critical inflection point, so
Yes.
I have to see how things work out. I have to see how they work out. Sundu?
I'm a little under the weather, Rotus.
I get you. Well, look, we'll see how things progress over the week.
As well. Thank you so much.